Hey, what's going on, everybody? Y'all know what it is. This your boy. Hey, so I'm up burning midnight oil. Let me turn this down a little bit. But I'm up burning midnight oil, and I'm finally getting to this video. I've been working this video probably for about 3 weeks now. And every time I started on it, life happens, I just said, you know what, tonight I'm gonna finally just sit down and go ahead on and finish it. But um, this video actually started as one thing, and it kind of morphed into something else. So what y'all gonna see is basically part one of a two-part video, maybe a three-part. I just gotta see. This is talking about the movie Posse, which is written and produced by Mario Van Peebles in 1993. Because I initially wanted to talk about the movie The Harder They Fall, and I was trying to get this out before the movie came out, but it came out October 22nd, and I'm still working the video. But I just kind of, The Harder They Fall deals with, black cowboys in the Wild West, cowboys and outlaws. The movie is a fictitious movie, but some of the characters in the movie were real. So I just kind of felt like before I could get to that, I had to talk about Posse first, because Posse was monumental at the time, because it just kind of educated us, and it brought out the fact that one out of every three, or one out of every four cowboys in the Wild West was black. I know that, prior to this, there had been other movies that came out, that, featured, blacks in the roles of cowboys. The first one to come to mind is Buck and the Preacher, which came out in 1972. And that was with Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte. Yeah, I remember seeing that as a kid. And then there's this movie that was called Thomasine and Bushrod in 1974, which starred Max Julien, which most people will remember as Goldie and the Mac. But that particular movie, Thomasine and Bushrod, was kind of a parallel to Bonnie and Clyde. So it was just kind of a black version of Bonnie and Clyde, and that came out in I think it was 1974. But there was this movie that I found. I'm just giving y'all some background before I get into this video. But I found this movie. It was called Two Gun Man from Harlem, which also was about, a black cowboy, that came out in 1938. So there has been movies made prior to Posse, in 1993. And then if you move forward, you had Brothers in Arms in 2005, and of course Django Unchained. But Posse was really different to me, and again, to me, it was, it was monumental, because it gave us, a lot of facts. And I don't want to get into it, about the movie. I do highly encourage y'all to go and check this movie out. But anyway, I wanted to do a video pretty much talking about the characters in The Harder They Fall. But I just felt that I could not do that without first talking about Posse. So I hope y'all like this video. As I always say, feel free to leave a comment, like, and as always, please feel free, to share it with other people.
I tell you what you do. You run down the street and get the law, and you tell them that Father Time and the Outlaw Posse is killing people, okay?
Really, the kid was a well-known villain, but I know a black villain that did more killing. Dismissed from the Western movies and TV.
Turn this down right here.
Killing them easy. The final frontier.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy C has Motivated Minds. I gotta be honest with y'all, I'm pretty excited right now, because the movie The Harder They Fall is about to come out. Now what's so special about this movie, you might ask? Well, this movie is pretty significant because it's about a group of people who has been really written out of history. But before I get into this, I want y'all to check this out.
Colt 45, single shot. You had to cock it every time you shot. It's called a peacemaker, but I haven't seen much peace that it brought. No. The guys today have that full automatic. Pull the trigger and spray. History's a funny thing. They got us believing that Columbus discovered America and the Indians were already here. That's like me telling you, and you're sitting in your car, that I discovered your car. Then they want to call them the evil red savages because they didn't give up the car soon enough. There's one thing about time. No matter how much or how little past is, it changes things. People forget their past, and they forget the truth. The pictures don't lie. Forgotten gunslingers like Nat Love, Hyson Dart, Cherokee Bill, and troops too, like the 9th and the 10th. See, people forget that almost 1 out of every 3 cowboys was black. Because when the slaves were freed, a lot of them headed out west, built their own towns. Shit, they didn't have much choice. In fact, over half of the original settlers of Los Angeles were black. But for some reason, we never hear their stories.
If you haven't figured it out by now, The Harder They Fall is a Western. I said that this movie is significant, and it is because of, several reasons. One being the cast. The cast is predominantly black. And that within itself, to me, is pretty profound, especially when you talk about Westerns, because when you think about the Wild West, you think about really white cowboys. And when you look at Hollywood, you see John Wayne and Glenn Ford and all kinds of other people, Clint Eastwood, playing cowboys. And black cowboys have been pretty much written out of history. So I can't talk about The Harder They Fall without first going back and talk about the movie Posse. Posse was written and directed by Mario Van Peebles. It came out in 1993. The person that you saw doing the narration in that scene that I showed y'all, his name was Woody Strode. And I'm not going to go too much. I don't really want to talk about Woody Strode right now because his story is extraordinary within itself. That man was a great man. He did a lot of things. Within that short narrative, though, he spoke on a lot of things that are important. He gave a lot of facts. I remember watching that intro like it was yesterday. The one thing that really stuck out in everything that he said is when he said 1 out of every 3 cowboys in the Wild West was black. Now, when if you look at different sources, some sources say 1 out of 3, other sources say 1 out of every 4 cowboys in the Wild West was black. So whether the number, whether it's 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 10, the point is that there were black cowboys in the Wild West. And this was 1993. So the funny thing about Posse to me is that it drew attention to the fact that there were black cowboys in the Wild West, and he goes on, before he started giving the stats, he goes on to name some when he's talking about Cherokee Bill and Ison Dart and Rufus Buck. But I'll get to that later because some of these people are characters in the movie The Harder They Fall. A lot of people forget that once slavery ended and blacks were freed, a lot of people headed west. And think about this for a minute. They just recognized Juneteenth as a federal holiday. Juneteenth was when General Granger made it out to Galveston, Texas, June 19th, 1865, to let the people know who were still held in bondage that they were free. A lot of those people stayed there, and a lot of people headed west, or further west into what was known as Indian Territory. So, you think about, you got Texas, you got Oklahoma, you got Arizona, New Mexico, and then you get into your Wyomings and Montanas. We're going to talk about Stagecoach Mary. She was in one of those places out there, out west, that a lot of people don't know about. There were plenty of blacks out in the West. And again, they were all but written out of history. Stagecoach Mary, she was out in Cascade, Montana. So if there were plenty of black people in the old Wild West, that means there had to be black towns and black settlements. The first one that comes to mind is a town called Nicodemus, which was in Kansas. I briefly mentioned uh, the Indian territory out west, and one of the first states that I named, which wasn't the state at the time, well, was Oklahoma. And when people think about Oklahoma, what they mainly think about is the Greenwood area in Tulsa, which we know as Black Wall Street. But what a lot of people don't realize is that Oklahoma became the premier haven for blacks back then between the years of 1865 and 1920. You know, in the late 1800s, there was a man by the name of Edwin P. McCabe, but he had served as the state auditor for Kansas. So when the Oklahoma district was opened up to settlers, he purchased 320 acres of land, and that land that he purchased became the town of Langston, Oklahoma, and it was founded in 1890. You know, so a lot of this stuff was mentioned about, you know, the black cowboys, you know, in the black towns, you know, in the beginning of the movie Posse. Something else that he mentioned was the 9th and 10th Cavalry Regiments, which we know as the Buffalo Soldiers. In 1866, 6 all-black infantry and cavalry regiments were created after Congress passed the Army Organization Acts. Now, the most famous of these that we still know is the 9th and 10th Cavalry Regiments, again, which we call the Buffalo Soldiers. So after we get through what is essentially the intro of the movie, it takes us to Cuba, and that's where we're introduced to Jesse Lee, you know, and his soldiers. So you might ask, well, what does that have to do with black cowboys in the Wild West? And I'm telling y'all have to watch the movie, and you'll get how it all ties together. But I'm telling y'all, for a movie that happened in 1993, I mean, this movie was prolific because it introduced us really to true history and facts. So 1898, what it showed was we were in the Spanish-American War, you know, in this country. So it showed this scene in Cuba, and it introduced us to the 10th Cavalry Regiment. So the Buffalo Soldiers actually they fought in Cuba as a part of the Spanish-American War. The 9th also fought, and I believe the 9th fought in the Philippines. But in this section of the movie, which really is still in the beginning, it shows us that the 10th Cavalry Regiment, who some of them were written out of history, they served, you know, they fought in the Spanish-American War in Cuba, you know, and you have to know history. Now check this out. Any of y'all ever heard of Teddy Roosevelt? How about, you know, you ever heard of Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders? Now the young people are probably thinking DMX and Stop Drop, Shut 'em Down, Open Up Shop. But, you know, Teddy Roosevelt had this group called the Rough Riders. Any y'all ever heard of them? Okay. Well, how about the Battle of San Juan Hill? All this took place in 1898. So what history does not tell you, they celebrate, you know, Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders and the Battle of San Juan Hill because this is what Teddy Roosevelt is really famous for. But what they don't tell you is that the 10th Cavalry Regiment actually saved them. They were, you know, instrumental in winning the Battle of San Juan Hill. So the cool thing about Posse is that it shows this, but you have to really know history to understand what we're actually seeing. Mario Van Peebles was really genius in the way that he did this movie, because I talked about black towns, you know, that was established in the Wild West as well. Well, what the movie really is about is him going back. He was running. You got to watch the movie, but he was on the run from, you know, this colonel who had served with, you know, in Cuba. But they, anyway, I don't want to get into the movie. You just got to watch it. But he was going back to a town called Freemanville that his father had dreamed about, and he found it. So here's another thing about history that he shows in this movie. I mean, this movie really shows the contributions of blacks, not only, you know, in serving our country, you know, in the military in the 1800s, but our contributions to the Wild West as cowboys, gunslingers, outlaws, you know, also the fact that we established towns and they were successful towns. So I'm just telling y'all, man, if y'all haven't seen it, y'all have to go check this movie out. And I just kind of wanted to go back and talk about Posse before talking about The Harder They Fall.